Friends, we have equally passionate, determined, and continuously working hard people on both sides. Let me take this opportunity to introduce another great friend of India, His Excellency Stewart Beck. Stewart Beck is the former president and CEO of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Prior to joining APF Canada, Mr. Beck served as the Canadian High Commissioner to the Republic of India with concurrent accreditation to the Kingdom of Bhutan and Nepal. He joined Canada's Department of External Affairs and International Trade, now Global Affairs Canada, in 1982 and served abroad in the United States, Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China. In Ottawa, he held a number of progressively more senior positions, including Director General of the North Asia Bureau, Director General responsible for senior management and rotational assignments, and Assistant Deputy Minister for International Business Development, Investment, and Innovation. He was Consul General in Shanghai, and prior to his posting to India, he was Consul General in San Francisco. Welcome, His Excellency Stewart Beck. We look forward to hearing you out and a great discussion with the great panelists today.
Well, thank you very much, Ratish and Satish and the Canada-India Foundation for the opportunity on this important day to moderate the session on stronger Canada-India engagement to speed up economic recovery. I'm personally situated in North Vancouver on the traditional territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We are fortunate to have an excellent panel, and for me, it's a pleasure to connect with old friends and former colleagues. I really can't think of a better group of people to talk about what Canada and India need to consider as we grow an incredibly important trade and economic relationship, and the vital role of the diaspora in this growth. First, let me introduce our panel in the order they will be speaking. Sara Wilshaw is going to be our first speaker, and Sara and I have known each other and have worked together since the early 2000s. But many of you know Sara from the time the two of us were in Delhi. Sara then was a Minister Commercial and responsible for the Government of Canada's Trade and Economic Program for South Asia. Since our time in Delhi, Sara has gone on to progressively more senior positions in global affairs and the Privy Council, and is now Canada's Chief Trade Commissioner and responsible for Canada's global network of trade and investment officers. Vijendra Gairola is another former colleague from our days together in India. Vijay is a graduate of the Schulich School of Business. He's a founder of Novelis Assembler Private Limited and Induscann Biogrowth Private Limited in India. Novelis manufactures prefabricated load-bearing walls in India and has secured 2 Indian government contracts to construct 1,500 government homes. Prior to starting Novelis and IBPL, Vijay spent 5 years as EDC's chief representative in India. During his tenure, EDC's business grew by over $2 billion US, and he helped grow EDC's customer base by over 25%. Vijay has over 25 years of experience in trade creation and international banking in North America, South America, and of course, Asia. Gary Comerford is another old friend, an India hand. Gary is president and CEO of CMC Global. Over 40 years, Gary has been actively involved in dealing with the enormous changes that have taken place in the financial services industry. I know Gary from the remarkable job he did in building the Birla Sun Life joint venture into the huge success it is today. He's currently a director of Novelis, a subsidiary of Hindalco Industries, a leading producer of rolled aluminum and the global leader in beverage can recycling. Gary received the ICCC's President's Award and the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal. Last and certainly not least is Ajay Ramasubramaniam. And again, I've known Ajay since my time in India. Ajay is founder and CEO of the startup Reseau. Ajay has been active in the Indian startup ecosystem for the past 8 years. And prior to setting up his venture, Ajay was a founding Indian director of Zone Startups, the India business joint venture with Ryerson Futures and the Bombay Stock Exchange. And during his 6 years at the helm of Zone Startups, he became a marquee international accelerator in India. And I also got to know Ajay when he was working for the government of Ontario as well. And again, I think the importance of the startup community is something that the High Commissioner has highlighted in his opening remarks. And it's a pleasure to be on the same session here at PBD with the High Commissioner, a good friend, and Minister Anand. Now, I'd like to just provide a quick overview of the importance of the Canada-India relationship as an engine for growth, and an important, dare I say, critical element in Canada's trade diversification strategy. After my short remarks, I will turn to our panelists and ask each of them for their thoughts on how to build a stronger economic relationship between Canada. I will use the moderator's prerogative to ask a probing question or two after the remarks, and then we will then open the floor for questions from the audience. Let me share some numbers with you that you might find interesting. By 2050, India's share of the world's GDP is expected to grow to 15%, compared to China's predicted 20%. India is already becoming one of the world's fastest growing economies. According to the OECD's most recent economic outlook report, released in March 2021, India is expected to be the fastest growing economy in 2021, with its year-on-year GDP expected to grow by 12.6%, compared to China's at 7.8 and Canada's 4.7. The Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, my former employer, investment monitor data shows that overall from 2003 to 2020, China saw about $46 billion worth of Canadian investment, and India about $32 billion. However, the foundation data also shows in the more recent years, India becoming increasingly popular for Canadian investors and recently outpacing China as an investment destination. From 2015 to 2017, China saw $4.5 billion in investment from Canada, while India attracted over $6 billion. In the most recent period, 2018 to 2020, China saw $7 billion in investment and India saw over $10.2 billion. So these are just a few numbers to demonstrate that India is attracting an awful lot of attention from the savvy investment community, and they recognize the potential of the country. So now let's get on to the main event. I encourage you to ask a few questions. I know the temptation is to provide commentary with your question, but it would be most appreciated if you could restrain your best intentions and focus on just the question. It makes it a little easier for those monitoring the box. Now, Sara, for your thoughts, what do you think are the two critical features or two critical aspects in growing the relationship between Canada and India in the context of the recovery?
Well, thanks, Stewart. And first, let me say what a great pleasure it is to be here. And thank you, a huge thank you to Satish and the whole executive team of the Canada-India Foundation for organizing this and for inviting me to be a part of this panel. It is a very great pleasure to be back with you, Stewart, and Vijay and Ajay and all our good friends from the community and those working in the India-Canada space. Absolutely. A critical moment to talk about how we speed up that economic recovery. Everybody's looking to find answers in this space. But before I say anything more, I just want to acknowledge as well that I'm participating virtually from Ottawa on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and very pleased to connect with others from the various territories and communities in which they are located. I think when Minister Anand, I think, said a lot of really important things about this as well. But with this, the government returning to this and looking at the priorities for the next phase, right? We are still trying to deal with the impacts of the pandemic, and they've been severe, right? There was a major drop off in business activity, in trade and commerce. But also a really big rebound. So we've seen that, and I think that's where we need to go. The High Commissioner Bhasaria mentioned some really positive numbers, some incredible growth in trade and opportunities, and he also talked about that startup ecosystem. And what that makes me think of is that's about building the base for the future, right? And I'm sure we're going to get into this. But when you and I were in India, Stewart, we were talking about how do we triple trade back then. And frankly, we were only there a short period of time, 3 years for me. I think you were there a little longer. But during that time, what we concentrated on was laying the foundation, right? By growing the number of companies and people active, institutions active in the market. And that's what we focused on. So building those kind of building blocks, as well as things like, we had the audiovisual co-production agreement, and we talked about the Nuclear Cooperation Agreement. We had continued discussions around a FIPA, that is a Foreign Promotion and Protection Agreement, or a bilateral investment treaty for our Indian friends, and also about a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. These are the kinds of things that underpin the future of relationships. So you need engagement from the business community, and it's so great to be here with, I mean, what an incredible diaspora we have that's very active in this space. So we just need more people to be active in India. At the time when we started there, we had around 250 Canadian companies and institutions who were active in the market. That's more than tripled now. So, and we started those processes back then. So what's the next thing? And I'm sure we'll get into a lot more of that. So that's kind of the first thing. And then what are those institutional pieces that will help to underpin the growth in the future, and that's another piece of the puzzle for sure. From my side, just to put a little plug in for the Trade Commissioner Service, we do have a really incredible team out there. The Trade Commissioner Service has been around for 125 years. And our goal is to help businesses succeed internationally in all markets, in all areas of economic activity. We have more than 15,000 clients, and in India, we've got more than 50 people working in 8 offices: Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru, Chandigarh, Kolkata, Chennai, Hyderabad, and Ahmedabad. So for those of you who are paying attention, we're definitely all along the Golden Quadrilateral, and all those corridors that are being built. So, what we really need are more people engaged. So I'll encourage folks to get in touch with us and see where we can go from here. And I'll stop there, Stewart, because I know we'll come to a lot more just in the discussion. Thanks.
And well, thank you so much, Sarah. And I think everybody can see that your enthusiasm was one of the reasons I worked really hard to get you to come to India as my minister counselor and minister commercial, I should say. And you did a fantastic job at that time. But you are working for the Canadian government, and the government does play a very important role in building the relationship. And I don't mean this to be a difficult question. I just want to ask you, how important really is it to have those bilateral agreements? I mean, do we need a FIPA really? Do we need a CEPA? We don't have them right now, and it's not really inhibiting things. But in my mind, there is an advantage. But I'd like you to, and maybe I'll build on what I know you're going to have to say. So go ahead. What do you think about that?
Well, look, there's a bit of cart and there's a bit of horse, right? So the business community needs to be engaged in a market to sort of have a good, clear understanding of what is needed in terms of their interests, their protections, their access to them. It's all about market access. So if you're having difficulty getting a product in, or the tariff rate is really high or prohibitive, or you want to have conversations about how to have mutual recognition of standards, those are the kinds of things you can take up in those agreements, as well as protection. So thinking about investments, how do you protect your investments from stuff that happens? Because things happen, and regulations change, and they might have an impact on an investment that you made. So how do you protect that investment from future activity, and how do you give people the confidence to go? And from the Canadian perspective, like, all things considered, I said I had 15,000 clients. It's more than that, but of the exporting community, that's about a third. There's maybe 45,000 exporters across Canada. So we're working with about a third, which is good. We want to keep growing that. But it's a really small group that works with India, say 750 to 1,000 that is working with India. So, how do we give people the confidence to go to India? Most Canadian companies want to do business with the United States because it's close, it's easily understandable, they can get there quickly, and so on. India seems far, it seems complicated. We want to de-risk that. We want to uncomplicate it if we can. And that's what the Trade Commissioner Service does. That's what our partners in EDC help us with, and so many other players in this space. But the agreements help. They really do help to give people that investor confidence, that business networking confidence, and so on. So I think that agreements do definitely have a place. And then just sort of the bigger picture right now, obviously, and with the government coming back in, rules-based trade and expanding on our export diversification priorities are like, that's top priority for the government of Canada and for Minister Ng. So there's no doubt that that's what we want to look at. The Indo-Pacific as a region, really, really important. And it's not an either or with China, for example, which attracts a lot of attention. It's an and, right? We need to be doing all of it and doing more of all of it. So those are, definitely the priorities. And I think there's a lot of goodwill on both sides and from both business communities to do more in this space. But obviously, trade negotiations are really tough to do from a distance and across virtual, and so we've really struggled over the last couple of years with this COVID pandemic to find spaces where people could be coming together to have the tough conversations about how to move forward in these agreements. And so I think that's been a challenge, but I know that there's an awful lot of goodwill out there.
Yeah, I think just as a quick follow-up on that, I think both sides in the context of an agreement have to put water in their wine, and that's just a reality. And I honestly hope that people would take a blue ocean approach to a negotiation, because if we really want a comprehensive and progressive agreement with India, that's going to be a challenge from the Canadian side. And it's, from the Indian side, they need to understand that, of course, there are issues that are important to Canada. So I think your point about goodwill is important, but it's been goodwill since 2010 when I arrived, when we first launched the negotiations. So we're now talking about going on to 12 years, and I don't know how many rounds of negotiations. So I personally think it's important to have an agreement. If for no other reason, it sends a really important message to the Canadian exporters, Sarah, and I think you made that point. And hopefully we'll be able to find some way and some approach that will work with both sides. Now I'd like to turn to Vijay. Vijay, again, was very instrumental during his time that we worked together in Delhi and building that group of companies, that new group of companies that came into India. And so Vijay, your thoughts on this? We had an interesting conversation before, and I know you have some ideas about how we can take this forward. So over to you.
Thanks, Stewart. Just want to pick up on where Sara left in terms of comprehensive agreement. Let's hope it's in place soon so that a number of Canadian companies can get comfort in it and come over. My message at the same time would be India doesn't really have a lot of comprehensive partnership agreements when it comes to trade, because these are never seen in isolation. And despite that, it's got trade exceeding $100 billion with many countries, hundreds of billions of dollars with many countries where there are no agreements. So while we wait for one to come into picture, let's not let that not be the factor that stops us from doing business with India. Now, as you correctly said, I've worked with both you and Sara, trying to help Canadian companies, been there, and in the last 7 years, I decided to stay back in India and actually be in trenches, so as to speak, and see what it is like to do business right from the scratch. And it was quite a learning. And what I'd like to share from that is the amazing system that has been built there by Trade Commissioner Services, provinces, federal agencies like EDC that helps Canadian companies come to India and do business. It plays a very, very valuable role. But beyond that, I think there is still something that can be done. And this is, and it's the way business is done in India. It goes beyond introductions. Once we make the introductions, then what? That's when the real work starts. And what I realized was really there was a lot more of expertise which was required just beyond the introductions or knowing the sector in general, which if it's on the table can really help Canadian companies. And the system right now, which is in place through TCS and other agencies, as I said, it's a wonderful system. It's a general system, but there is no way that it can handhold a business to get to the finish line. And there's a scope that expertise can be brought in whether it's embedded into the system or whether it can be brought in from outside the system, from entities, whether it's Canada India Foundation or other entities which are involved in Canada India businesses. Their help can be sought, and then a deeper expertise can be built that can then take it to the next stage. Just want to let you know, I'm also recovering from COVID, so my throat is not very good. So I'm speaking slow. I hope it's clear to everyone. So now, just to give you an example, we are in construction sector. When I started, I knew there are opportunities. I knew India is building thousands and thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of housing units and infrastructure. But how do you do that? And it was quite a journey. We actually ended up shooting in the dark. And there are tenders on the internet. How do I go? Do I go and bid directly? Is it as simple as that? Or do you need to go and first get your product certified? And then what we figured out in the process was that you need to go and get help from, let's say, IITs and get them to do testing on your product and then take that to the central government, the Ministry of Housing, and get your product certified. And then in turn work with the architects who actually design these government projects and then bid for it. So there was a learning which was quite new for us. And I'm just giving you one example from one sector, but in every sector, if we can build this kind of understanding and bring in experts who can handhold Canadian companies to go through the finish line, that's one thing I think which will really augment the trade and take this number from, I think it's probably 700 or 800 companies right now to 2,000 or 3,000 companies. So that's one area. The second area where I feel a lot of opportunities exist now in absence of a trade agreement. India is a federal structure, just like Canada. The provinces or the states here call as many shots as in Canada. I feel there should be a much deeper engagement between Canada and states in India. And the states are very, very open to doing enhanced trade, because what we've seen of late is no government can win an election unless they show economic progress. And that economic progress comes when they show results. A lot of chief ministers, or the premiers as we call them in Canada, have their targets and they understand the value of international trade. I believe Canada can go and, I'm not talking about free trade agreement, but go to, let's identify 10 states and go and have agreement with these states, identify what their needs are, and bring in Canadian expertise to these states. And I can assure you, I've met with probably 7 or 8 chief ministers over the last 5 or 6 years. They are right now very, very, their outlook is very favorable to get foreign trade, foreign investment into their states. So that's where we can do some work to sign agreements with the state governments while we continue to work with central government and central government agencies and take that forward. That'll be very helpful. I don't want to take a lot of time, Stewart, so if you want me to stop right now and give chance to others to come back.
What I'd like to do is ask you a question, because there are a couple of things that you brought up which I think are really important. You've done an awful lot of work in the construction sector, and you and I had a conversation about this, and you know, Sarah knows this because we talked an awful lot about it when we were in Delhi. Canadian companies tend to be SMEs, so they're not very large, and they don't necessarily attract the attention of the Indian government, certainly at the state level, or even at the federal government level or central government level in terms of their size. And so if you go and bid, as you mentioned, it's very difficult. So having the knowledge base that you, as a member of the diaspora, who know and understand Canada, who know and working with a Canadian construction company, for example, let's talk about the idea. Would you be open to working with other companies in that sector to kind of build a larger presence in the terms of construction technologies that will have big impact, which will help those Canadian companies scale in their own backyard here in Canada? So your thoughts on working together, because we typically always think it's a competitive world out there, but in a place like India, Canada is too small to be competing with each other. We have to tend to work together. So what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, Stuart. There is a role that existing diaspora and existing Canadian companies can play. to tag along other Canadian companies into the ecosystem. Having said that, let's not go by trillions of dollars of opportunities. And there are niche players. For us, we started from zero. We started from zero and we still got this contract to build 1,500 flats right now. And the only reason why it's 1,500 right now and not 3,000 is because we don't have capacity. Our capacity is sold out for next 2 years. So the idea is for the Canadian companies to find their niche. Don't worry about how small they are, what is their size. Work with players, the Trade Commissioner Services, other agencies, and the players who have gone through the whole grind and understand what it takes for them to get embedded in it. You may not want to bid on the entire contract now, unless you are one of the bigger Canadian companies that we're all aware of who are doing business in India. You need to work with the main contractor and be one of the subcontractors or the technology provider or a niche product provider. And then the idea is for you to not to worry about going and bidding and dealing with the government, but dealing with this main contractor, which is looking for that niche product. So just to give an example, the contract that we got, one of the contracts we got, the Indian government itself said, this is a global housing technology challenge. And we're going to be using construction technologies which have not been in India. And we're going to give 1,000, they call them flats. The units or apartments are called flats. We're going to give 1,000 flats in 6 locations to 6 companies. Now, there is no way a Canadian company can come and bid on 1,000 unit in any one location in India because it requires local expertise. But what they can do is they can go to that main contractor and they can bring in the expertise that they have. And we are about 20-25% of the overall contract. And so this is where I fit in. And I'm going to deal with you, you deal with the government, and then you both become signatories in the contract, but somebody else is actually fronting the contract with the government that's got the expertise. So don't be too concerned with it's government, it's too complicated. You leverage the existing system, existing players who've done it, and go from there.
And just another follow-up, based on your own experience at EDC and working with Canadian companies, this is the $1 million question, Vijay. Are you working with EDC and with this Canadian company that you're dealing with? What's the role of the toolkit that Sara is responsible for? EDC, CCC, do they actually play a role alongside the Trade Commissioner Service for a company like yourself doing business in India?
So no, I'm not working with EDC for one simple reason. It's not about EDC, it's the Indian regulations when it comes to banking. Because Indian Central Bank does not allow foreign funding into construction sector. So just for that reason, EDC cannot be brought into this picture. But clearly, interestingly, you mentioned CCC. Now, CCC is government to government. So that is a very good role to play in India if they decide to play a role in India, because if they come in India and bid on a contract, but first it's government to government, so they really do not need to bid on it. They can get it directly. Then they can bring in a lot of Canadian companies as a part of the entire ecosystem. So CCC is a completely different ball game, but they do have a role to play in India, indeed.
Great, super. Now I'd like to move on to Gary. Don't worry, Vijay, we'll come back, and Sara, don't take a rest, and you can have a cup of coffee while we keep chatting here. But Gary, you're a great example of a success story, and but you've been working with a much larger organization, and you're dealing in the financial services sector. What are your thoughts? You and I had a good conversation yesterday, and there are a couple of things that I'd like to pull out of that conversation if you don't touch on it. So over to you.
Thank you, Stewart. First of all, Stewart, thank you very much for the opportunity to the CIF to be here today. And Stewart, just for you to be able to have this dialogue and the other members of the panel. It is interesting. You kind of sit back and you say, all right, what maybe have I learned in kind of my business career, and what would be useful knowledge to others kind of going forward? And I can appreciate that a lot of the conversation is going to be very much specific as to what we can do in India today. If I could just take a minute and maybe take those that are tuned into there back a bit and kind of look at international trade just generally. And you kind of say, all right, where is Canada as far as international trade is concerned? When I was working with Sun Life, and I was doing business all over the world. I flew down to Chile and negotiated a pension agreement down there. Looked at companies in France. The point I want to make here is that Sun Life was taking a very much an international perspective. And at one point in time, what we were doing is we were looking at every market, and quite honestly, it was killing us. We were not identifying what I later termed the superior opportunities. And one of the superior opportunities that we identified, and this will go back to 1996, was India. And at the time, it was only because of a Malta report and that the market was beginning to open up. Sun Life had a history there, so there were a lot of reasons. But it was very clear that the CEO and the management at Sun Life said, no, we're not going to go to 10 places and expand. We're going to go to just a few. And we identified India as one of them. So if I can put that in a context of an international strategy, for our government, first of all, I want to say just how much I have appreciated and used trade services around the world, and visited offices and got advice, counsel, protection, all kinds of things over the years. So the role that they play is vital, but it all comes down from the instructions from the Prime Minister to the Minister. And when I read the mandate that our current Trade Minister, Minister Ng, has, it is a very general mandate. So I say to myself, what are the priorities of our trade group? And I see many good things in there. That's not the issue. There's hardly anything I'm going to criticize. But what I did learn is that if you don't focus, if you don't have priorities, you will not be successful. And in my view, after dealing with the Indian market for over 25 years in a highly successful way, as you noticed, I've just learned that the valuation, of the asset management company we set up in 1999 is $4 billion now. So it's not insignificant as far as an asset is concerned. But how did that happen? It only happened because of a long-term commitment and significant resources that a company like a Sun Life will have. All companies don't have that. So what would I like to see from the government? Well, first of all, I think there are a few markets around the world that have that superior opportunity. I think they need to be identified and articulated. I think if you did that fair, unbiased evaluation, India is going to come right up there at the top of the list. And if that is the case, then what needs to happen? Well, we've just had some dialogue regarding the FIPAs and CIPAs and those agreements. I did not have gray hair when we started those negotiations and conversations. They have been going on a long time. There are many reasons why maybe they haven't been concluded. But I will contend that as we sit here in 2022, there is a brand new international trade dynamics going on. And that when we look to the south, we see a protectionism. We look around the world, we see a very different market. And Canada can't look inward and say, we're going to survive just on our market alone. We have to look out. So to me, that means that when we've identified superior opportunities in markets, we need to take a new, bold approach to negotiating these agreements. And not necessarily, I think, Stewart, you used the term blue ocean. In other words, we can't just stick to those things that we've always stuck to and don't get a deal. And we've done that for 10 years. That has to stop. We have to look at opportunities that are going to assist Vijay in his construction business, that we are going to have to look at things that are going to help facilitate. It will not be perfect. But the truth of the matter is that Canada, I believe, needs these relationships with India more than India does. So we're going to have to give, and we're going to have to ensure that it's done. So if I kind of look back, I say right now that there is a wonderful opportunity ahead of us. I can absolutely appreciate that COVID for the Trade Commissioner services and for our government, it's been a very disruptive time. But with that disruption has caused the need for change. So with that need for change, let's recognize that India is that superior market. Let's look at recognizing that the number of unicorns that are coming out of India is not insignificant. the fact that the Canadian expertise in so many areas, other than just minerals and agriculture, can be of assistance to this nation, and we need to take advantage of it and ensure that our government negotiates agreements quickly in a real sense that will facilitate that. To allow the government to set the language up that allow business to be done, and that will cause success to happen. So what I say now is the time for real meaningful engagement, not the, oh, we're all going to be nice to everybody, which I've heard for 10 years. Get down to real negotiations and engage. Recalibrate. Okay, what do we need? What are our priorities? What is our focus? And get that done. Get agreement. Any agreement is better than nothing, is what we have right now, in my estimation. And then in a very polite way, I would say the government needs to get out of the way. If they set up the right mechanisms, if they set up the right vehicles to get to facilitate business, the entrepreneurial spirit of both India and Canada will take over. I can think of countless examples in the Canadian economy of entrepreneurs and individuals. Many are on this call today that are taking full advantage of the market in not ideal situations. So let's try and create the best environment we possibly can. And the time's now. Let's do it.
Thanks, Gary. And you made a lot of great comments. And there's a word that I like to use in the context of the Canadian government. And this is something that I always, from my own background and my own understanding, having spent time in Silicon Valley, I'll use a term that I think is really important, and that is catalyst. They should be a catalyst. The government and the Trade Commissioner Service and Sara and her team can't lead people to the water. I mean, they can define what the situation is, but ultimately being a catalyst, kind of setting it up in a way that companies can come in and succeed. So just in the context of strategy, and I'll refer back to our thinking during the time that I was there. We decided that, quite frankly, there were 4 areas where we could have an impact in India, and where we could have some actually have some relevance. One was energy, in the context of energy security, and it's really our challenge more than anything else, because if we could have gotten LNG across Canada to the East Coast, we'd be selling LNG, as much LNG as the United States is now selling into India. That's more our fault than anything else. The second area was infrastructure, but not necessarily building it, but financing it. And I think we've seen some success in that area. The third was on the education front. And you take a look and think about where we were in 2010, 2011, Sarah, we were doing 3,000 student permits a year. What are we doing now? And again, it's a lot of it is the work of the people at the High Commission at the time. And, we'd had a great team, and also, that helped set the catalytic stage. And of course, the institutions take it from there. And then the last area was high tech. And again, it was really focusing on how we could connect the Canadian startup ecosystem to what was happening in India at that time, which wasn't really very much back in those days. And you take a look and see where it is today. And so in some ways, Sara and her team should take some credit in the unicorn work that you're seeing. So I agree with you 100%, Gary, in the context of strategy, but that was our strategy for India and how we would attract more companies in there and how we would get work. What you're saying is the government needs to take the same approach on a broader basis, understand what the opportunities are, and then, quite frankly, Sara, I think the point is how do we support that in a catalytic way? And one of the things that I think, as a result of this conversation, there are some ideas which we can talk about as we get into the conversation. But before we do that, I just one last thought from you, Gary. I mean, if you were to say, in the context of your experience with India, what would you tell Sara, or what would you tell Minister Ng if she was on this call, on this session, from a strategic perspective, and India, what would be the most critical thing from your perspective?
Well, thanks. To me, I like your word catalyst, and in many respects, I remember somebody said to me, he said, "Who's your boss?" And somebody said, "Well, who acts like your boss?" Okay. And I think the government has to act like they're interested in doing business with India in a real meaningful way. So that's the FIPA, the CEPA dialogue, minister exchange. The Prime Minister, quite honestly, going to India, not for a photo op, not to please the kind of a political aspect, but really to engage trade, to be there and have serious discussions. On his last visit, he really did not do that. And to stay there, to understand the market, and to send the message that as the leader of Canada, we're really serious about doing business, because we have countless business executives that do that on a regular basis that reinforce that. So I strongly think that that's important. But this is not a simple problem. I remember having a conversation a decade ago with the beer list. And I asked the question, what would it take for the Ajay Ramasubramaniam Group to do more business in India? And I remember Dr. Singh was clear. He says, well, you have to improve your infrastructure. He says, if we want to get in the potash business and we want to bring it to the east, your rail lines, your ports, your natural gas pipelines. These are all important infrastructure issues geared towards the other side of Canada that are going to promote that type of trade. And that's 25-year thinking. And it has to happen when not only the federal government, the provinces all get together and realize this isn't important, this is critical. And that's where we are today.
Yeah, I think an excellent point, and it's a great takeaway, Gary. It's really commitment from the top and cascading down through a variety of organizations at the federal level, but also at the provincial level. So that commitment is critical. Now, on to Ajay. Ajay, I mean, everybody's talking about the startup community, the tech community, unicorns. You've been doing this for as long as I've known you anyway. So what do you think about this? What are your thoughts? And I think, a lot of what we're doing now, I think has tremendous potential, because it's a clean piece of paper. And I used to say it was always difficult to do business in India in the traditional sectors, because rent seeking had kind of worked its way into the system and it was very sophisticated. In the technology space, it's a clean sheet of paper. So there's lots of areas that you can work on and to move forward into the future. So your thoughts, Ajay, and then we'll get into more of an open conversation.
Sure. Thanks, Stewart, in the first place to get me to speak on this panel, and thank you, Canada India Foundation, for putting this event together. It's my pleasure to be here and speak. So just picking on the points that the earlier speakers, panelists spoke about, I think when it comes to startups, the 4 points that probably were standing true about a decade back, and they still stand true, whether it is for Indian startups and emerging technology companies looking at expanding into North America and looking at Canada as where they would establish their home. And likewise for Canadian startups rather, looking at expanding eastwards and looking at India. I think the first and foremost thing is being passionate about a market. If there are Indian companies, they need to be passionate about getting into Canada for the right reasons, rather than looking at it as, you can always look at it as a segue into the US, but whether you're looking at talent, you're looking at R&D, the super clusters, whatever. And likewise for Canadian startups or emerging tech companies which are looking at expanding here, the reasons have to be why and what the business case is, rather than their neighbor or someone else kind of looked at getting into India. The second thing is being proactive. If you really believe in India as a market, you got to get onto a flight and be here. I mean, current times are different, but I mean, even in the past decade that I have been engaged in the Canada-India ecosystem, and particularly in the last 7 or 8 years, I can probably count the number of startups from Canada who I know who have spent and have gone out of pocket, rather than just depending on trade missions or probably subsidies, but because they truly believed in India as a market. There's a lending tech company, an ed tech company, and a life sciences company, and I've known all 3 founders for fairly long, more than 5 years. And despite not really having immediate business, their proactiveness and perseverance, which is the third P that I wanted to touch upon, is truly commendable. And the last one is truly forming partnerships not just for the heck of it, because a lot of times partnerships, joint ventures, they can be misconstrued or understood to be in one way, without really kind of delving into what I bring to the table and what you bring to the table, and kind of really forming those equitable partnerships. I think once these 4 building blocks are in the right place and the right mind, I think for Indian emerging tech companies, because those are the ones who really need the kind of hand holding to expand into Canada as a market. I mean, the big companies, whether it is the TCSs of the world, the Aditya Birlas of the world, they'll always find their way to expand into new market. But the ones which are able to create jobs by the tens and the hundreds and thousands are unicorns which are probably not even born today. I mean, the rate at which Indian startups are raising capital, and especially in the last 12 to 18 months, if we see the number of companies that have raised significant capital and have grown significantly, those are the ones that probably Canada wants to attract as FDIs, because they are the ones who are going to create the next generation jobs. So keeping a hand, or keeping or having a good perspective of how the startup ecosystem or the emerging tech ecosystem is kind of maturing in both the markets, I guess is possible only when you're kind of building really those robust partnerships and are staying close to the market. So from a startup perspective, that is what I would talk about, the 4 P's: passion, proactiveness, perseverance, and partnerships.
Thanks, Ajay. Because I've always felt that the technology space is one that is an area that Canada has global leadership in certain areas. And we have done a very good job, I think, from a policy perspective, in terms of creating Canada as an international talent hub. So companies in India, companies around the world are beginning to realize that Canada is a good place to locate, not just to attract talent from their own country, but talent from other countries. Are there any other things that you see that have been helpful in your job of bringing Indian companies to Canada? Besides the talent hub dimension, is there anything else that the Canadian government or the provinces or the ecosystem has done to make it attractive for Indian companies to participate here?
Sure. And I think by virtue of having worked for the Ontario government for few years, I probably look at it a little bit differently, because I've worn a couple of hats, one with the Ontario government, then working with Ryerson University and setting up that shop in India, and then running my own venture. I think while the startup visa program is definitely a program that a lot of companies do look at, but if the objective is about doing business in Canada or building a business in North America, I think a lot of them, they fall into the trap of just looking at the startup visa program as a single window, or I mean that's the only way of going about it, and they end up hiring consultants and whatnot, and it kind of many times it blows up, and then people start talking ill or about their experiences. But definitely, I mean, given the kind of presence that the provinces have on the ground, the road shows, events that provinces do, probably even if you look at the different programs, I mean, my former employers, Ryerson Zone Startups is still around. University of Toronto has partnered with Tata Trust to set up something around sustainability, clean tech, and it's expected to be a big one. So definitely, if you look at the universities, if you look at the R&D ecosystem, if you look at economic development agencies, I think there's enough and more out there to give out or disseminate different kind of information which is relevant for startups or companies, for them to absorb and kind of create a plan. I guess one of the things that a lot of companies miss out on, for them it's about getting into North America. They don't really have a plan, and they do not understand. There are very few companies which are mature enough to understand that it's not like shipping boxes or shipping packages. If you want to kind of get into North America, if you want to get into Canada, I guess a lot of times companies have to be coached individually as a founder or a company. Probably many times the communication style has to change. Probably some of the modules that they're building, if it's a tech product, it has to be kind of made very purposeful for that local market. I can talk of, or I know a few companies which have done that, and they've tasted success much faster. So yeah, I mean, and that's where probably it's private-public partnership, or how and where different organizations coming from different backgrounds kind of play an active role. I mean, government can do X, but beyond that, if you look at private sector organizations, if you look at the incubators and accelerators, I think if you look at it as an ecosystem, that's where I guess the meat is, and that's where companies can kind of really benefit from. And also, if you look at programs like the CTA, the Canadian Technology Accelerator, I guess it's being revived and launched in India this year. So for a lot of Canadian companies to get into India as a market, I guess that's an additional channel beyond just going into the Trade Commissioner service. It's a very focused program. And likewise, I mean, some of the initiatives that we run as a private organization, Startup Bridge Canada, I mean, we realize that not everyone is looking at just a market access program to accelerate their growth in North America or in Canada. For many of them, even to get insights which helps them make a go no-go strategy. A lot of times you don't want to spend a year worth of money, time, resource, and then say, hey, this is absolutely not the market I want to be in. So a lot of those kind of initiatives as well, I guess, is super critical. And there are a lot of Canadian incubators and accelerators as well. And probably one of the good things to come out of COVID is a lot of virtual programming. I mean, without spending insane amounts of money and time traveling between countries and continents to realize that this is not where I want to be. I think a lot of virtual programming has actually enabled companies, especially startups, who anyways, in many cases might have scarce resources, to make the decision as to which market to be in and in what format or what way. So.
No, I think you made a lot of very good points there, Ajay. I think, as we get into, the last part of our session, there's some questions that have popped up that I think are useful to address. But I think, what I'd like to do is help Sara frame a strategy for India, which I think is important, or whether it's a trade strategy, because she's responsible for, for Canada's trade promotion network and trade promotion activities. But when it comes to India, there are certain things, and I've always felt that, building on what we were doing, 10 years ago, there are some other things that have happened recently that I think are really important. And it goes to the whole issue around toolkits. And again, this is building on something that all of you have said, and that is, where does Canada have global leadership? And then what do we do to be a catalyst, or what needs to be done in a catalytic role for those companies to be successful? And one thing, if you talk about machine learning as an example, and that cuts across a number of different sectors, whether it's agriculture and agricultural technology, whether it's energy and sustainability, which you raised, the role of data, and the fact that India is 1 billion people, and there's huge sinks of data, whether it's financial, Gary, whether it's data on agriculture. What can we do to facilitate Canadian company access to data like that? And this is my point to you, Sara. I mean, how do you create that governance structure, at the government level, even on a bilateral basis between Canada and India? Because you're not going to be able to do that with China, quite frankly, but you might be able to do it with India. So your thoughts, I'll open it up. I'll first go to Sara, and then I'll ask the other people what you think about maybe looking at bilateral agreements, a bilateral agreement between Canada and India that would be more sector specific or issue specific, as opposed to an overarching type of agreement. So your thoughts initially, Sara, as the person who can put it out there, and then everybody will tell you what you should be doing. Okay, so there you go.
I think that's great. I'm excited to hear how folks would frame a strategy for India for me, because I certainly don't have a monopoly on good ideas, and all of you are involved in many different ways. And Gary's laid out some really great ideas, Ajay and Vijay as well, and I thank them for all their thoughts. Certainly, I think you said it well, Stewart. You want to be a catalyst, and as I said, I think at the beginning, what I want to do is set up the building blocks that will help us, grow through the next 10 years. Like, it's been 10 years since we were there. Like, what does the next 10 years look like? Gary's point on the new international dynamic, absolutely right. And Ajay touched on it as well, where we're talking about the virtual. I'll go you one better. We're talking about the digital space, right? And this is where the data comes down to it. And Canada, 38 million people, right? We're a drop in the bucket, or a rounding error when it comes to kind of numbers in a place like India. So the data sets that is so rich. You and I have talked, Stewart, about the idea that we could do something together in that space around the use of data. And I think about how important it is that India is part of the global partnership on AI, right? That is headquartered and hosted here in Canada with France. It was a partnership, came out of the G7, and it's really important because that's kind of where it's going. But I don't disagree, and I mean, I'm not the negotiating side of things, but I can certainly have conversations with the minister, the deputy minister, and my colleagues on the trade policy side. Those data partnerships, and that is where things are going, right? You've seen digital partnerships start to emerge in a lot of the Asian context and ASEAN. Singapore is sort of heavily engaged in this. Conversations with New Zealand and others. Canada's looking at those as well. That's in all reality, that is that's got to be included, and whether it's a standalone or part of a bigger package, that I can't say, but for sure, how can we pass up the opportunity to work together on how you develop technologies that are based in that rich data and support those kinds of pieces going forward. Really open to that idea.
Well, and I think the important thing, Sarah, and this is again talking as a person who spent enough time in Silicon Valley. If we get there faster and first around this governance structure, it helps us gets ourselves specced into the process, right? And that I think is really important. So Gary, I think, has got his hand up, so he's got I'm sure some strong comments to make. Go over to you, Gary.
I just want to support both Sarah and what you're saying, Stewart. It's funny, I remember back in 1996, I went to set up a life insurance company. The very first thing we did was we set up an asset management company and a distribution company. Why? Well, because we could. It was simpler, and it got an opportunity for us to learn about India, working with our partner, and to create a success. And then that enabled the life insurance company, which was far more complicated to set up, but hopefully to be successful. My point is this: when you talk about various sectors, you can say we want a comprehensive trade agreement. Well, that's okay. But if you could get 4 sectors, and you cover energy, infrastructure, education, IT, and you get specifics in that are going to facilitate the building of a relationship that can flourish, that's a great strategy. But do it.
And fund it, right?
And fund it.
And resources.
It's far less expensive to do something like that. And pick the winners. Pick the people that are successful, the entrepreneurs, work with them, back them. More important, listen to what they need to be successful in the agreements. All right. If VJ needs to be able to do business with EDC, then put that and get an agreement on that as a sidebar and give something else together. That's how it works in India.
Yeah, I agree. Vijay, what are your thoughts on something like this? If you were to, your experiences in the construction sector, and I think another interesting sector where Canada has some leadership. You didn't talk about it very much, but we do. We do have leadership in that particular area. So your thoughts about, how we kind of put ourselves in a better position with what sort of catalytic tools would be helpful. So
I think sectoral agreements is a much better approach than a comprehensive agreement. I wish I'm wrong, but these are very complicated agreements, even during best of the times and with political compulsions on both sides. What are the chances that we're going to see a comprehensive partnership agreement for next 3-4 years or even beyond that? Again, I wish I'm wrong, but I don't think it's going to happen. Rather, a sectoral specific agreement, and that's where we need to see what is it that India wants. And from my perspective, I see 2 areas. One is clearly the energy, and the other is money. And India has an asset monetization program of give or take $80 to $100 billion over the next 5 years. At a straight line amortization, that's $20 billion a year. Now, we know that Canadian pension funds, long-term money providers have put in close to $30 to $40 billion in last few years in India. That is a substantial amount. And given this asset monetization program, India would be looking at long-term money, which is good for us in Canada because we have an aging population and our pension funds want these long-term assets. So I feel if we focus on these 2 or 3 areas where India really wants it, we have a chance of having a success. We can always try for other industries that we have that we want to promote in India and see if we have successful. But in my opinion, these 2 or 3 areas are kind of low-hanging fruit where we can have a much quicker success.
Well, Sara, you and I had been in discussions for the last year or so around the importance of having money for demonstration projects. And this goes to one of the questions that popped up in the Q&A box about sustainability. And we talk about energy. Vijay mentioned that as an area of potential opportunity. But again, one of the challenges, we have companies that have great technology. They can sell it with the support of Sustainable Development Technologies Canada, SDTC here, but they can't necessarily use that money abroad in terms of demonstration projects. Is this something that we can put into a toolkit? Are we thinking about this in terms of how we help those companies with those leading edge technologies, whether it's agriculture, in the agricultural technology space or energy space, energy efficiency? Can you imagine as the technologies that would be supported in India as the middle class grows and more air conditioners are being put into people's windows, the impact that has on energy and the energy efficiency necessary to make that happen and the cost associated with that? Are we going to be able to do something like that? And I know you've been talking about it. We have a mutual friend involved in that process. So, what's your thinking along that line?
So the short answer is yes. We've absolutely been thinking about it, and we've been trying to figure out ways for us to do this better and more intentionally, and working with our partners across government and in the private sector and the provinces to find ways to do kind of it's like a tech demo, like international tech demo, right? To bring those technologies, show what we can do and to showcase it. And a market like India, I mean, we've been talking 10 years ago, we were talking about vertical access wind turbines for all of the cell phone towers in India, 500,000 cell phone towers, most of them running off of diesel gensets. So talk about an impact on climate change mitigation if you can find ways to reduce the diesel consumption in even in that small a space. There's tremendous opportunity. Thinking also about solar and how fast India wants to move in this space as well. So there's a lot of political will. So there's no question that those kinds of things are there. We did, I think it was maybe a year and a half ago or so, there was a group that went out on water and wastewater treatment as well. And this was a really, really successful visit. We want to do more of that kind of thing to bring together the communities that are developing these things, where we have and you said it yourself, we're very complementary in a number of areas, right? In terms of needs and what we have to offer. And so can we find other tools and mechanisms and then fund those and support those things? This is the tough piece. So how do you do that in a way that makes sense? So yeah, back to the short answer. Yes, we are trying to figure out ways to do that. So keep watching that space, but we're going to continue through the Canadian Tech Accelerator process to really put the spotlight on the Canadian technologies that can make a difference and introduce them to the communities and partners. Because what Vijay said about having the right partners and the local expertise is absolutely critical, and getting them into like I think Ajay was saying, like second and third tier cities as well. So spreading out further so that we are accessing those, those goals that each of the chief ministers have, to sort of deliver on this as well at the same time.
And Ajay, just a quick question for you. I mean, you're dealing with this on a daily basis with the young Indian companies that have a lot of potential. Where do you see, what can we do to make it, whether it's around data or what other areas, if we were to take a look at it, something more on a sector specific basis, what would make sense in the context of those companies that would benefit in India by working with Canadian companies in a particular area? What's your thinking on that?
Sure, and because we are on the topic of data, I'll just plug this in. So if you look at the banking and financial service industry in India, there is, I mean, one of the unique things about India and when it comes to fintech in India is that unlike several other countries where the government plays the role of a regulator formulating policies, India has been a step ahead in terms of setting up infrastructure, building out technology and rolling out, because of which there's a lot of trust element which has come in. I think the last one to catch on to the bandwagon in terms of building a sandbox was IRDA, which is the insurance regulator. But if you look at just day before yesterday, Reserve Bank of India has for the first time opened up a fintech innovation department. I mean, one wouldn't think that RBI would go and set up a fintech innovation cell, but they have realized that better late than never. They got to do it. But apart from that, if you look at initiatives like, so if you look at the credit requirement, and when you look at credit requirement for individuals and micro, small, medium enterprises is 150,000 crores. I don't know how many billions that runs into. And the credit that actually gets met is about 7% of that. So 93% of credit requirement in the market for individuals and micro, small, medium enterprises, 93% is unmet demand over there, which is a huge opportunity. And one of the main reasons why that problem exists is that India, for a very long time, did not and still does not have a public credit registry. Even though it has been tabled about 4 years back, it is still in the making. It is expected to be out at some point in time. But a lot of frameworks and architectures are being formed, like this account aggregator ecosystem. I mean, all of it which leads to an individual being in control of his or her data. Now, when we talk of data, I think there are two major opportunities that Canada and Canadian organizations, research centers can tap into. One is the excellence that Canada has when it comes to machine learning and artificial intelligence, whether it comes out of universities and research centers or companies that exist out there. And the second one, which is a more important one, is cybersecurity. I think just if you look at one vertical, financial services, and the amount of data that's floating around, I think machine learning, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, if you just build it into that one funnel, I think there's a huge opportunity for Canadian companies, universities to tap into. So I'll just leave it at that one.
No, I think you made some really good points there, and Ajay, and it's worth noting. I think it's an area, again, in the context of if we're looking at things on a sector-specific basis, is one that feeds into the services side of any sort of agreement, which I think is important. There was an interesting question that popped up, and I'm going to reframe it a little differently. For whatever reason, today, China's getting a lot of attention. It's been getting a lot of attention for the last 10 years. India doesn't really get much attention in the context of business opportunities from a Canadian perspective. What needs to be done to kind of promote within the country, India, and so in understanding the opportunity? And maybe Gary, I'll go to you first, because you've probably been feeling this for a long time, and what you're thinking on this. How do we get people to understand that this is the opportunity? Yes, it's difficult, but you know what? You can actually do business, and you were a good example of being successful in that area. Well,
it's nice of you to say that. I think that today, celebrating the diaspora, the CIF, the ICCC, the CIBC do a very good job at looking inward at the Indian diaspora. And I think that the people that are on this call today, I think if you probably, maybe it's because of the nature of it, but by far the large number of people that are here are people that are associated with the Indian diaspora. So when you talk to people of Indian heritage that live in Canada, they're very pro-Indian. That's not even an issue. And we have these conversations. It's kind of like inside baseball conversation. We have to get it outside baseball. We have to get it into the mainstream dialogue of what will cause economic success for Canada. And we have to take it away from the political dialogue of India into the real attributes of what can be successful. I am so privileged to be on the board of Novelis. Novelis is a Canadian corporation, all right? Happens to be headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. It is owned by Hindelco, an Indian company controlled by the PBD Celebrations Group. When we have conversations about billion-dollar investments around the world, all right? The caliber of the companies that are in India, whether it be, whether it be the Tatas, whether it be the Birlas, the Ambanis, whoever it happens to be, there is not an appreciation that this is the group that are generating the next generation of success. And that's where it's going to come from. And Canada can facilitate that through a number of the areas of expertise we have, technology, infrastructure, all kinds of them. But we are not having that dialogue at that level. And I will go back to the Prime Minister, to the Minister, to the provinces. They understand the importance, but we have not got the conversation on a daily basis as to what and just how successful Canada could be competing in India. We just need it facilitated a little better. And that's what I would recommend. We've got to elevate the conversation.
Yeah, and I think, you touched on it. It's come up a couple of times in the chat box, but also in the Q&A. I mean, the reality of Canada is we pride ourselves on being multicultural. And the reality is it creates some problems for us from a political perspective, because you end up with, focusing within the Indian community, which is quite diverse, as we know. There are competing challenges from a political perspective domestically, and sometimes we just, when we did a paper not too long ago at the foundation, one of the issues that was really quite critical is that we need to take domestic politics out of our international trade strategies, because ultimately that creates all sorts of issues that are difficult to deal with. And I think whether or not you believe that the Prime Minister's visit was a success, part of that was tied up in some of the politics that were involved, domestically in Canada. So again, it's hard to do. I mean, it's something that we have to face, but ultimately, and that's not just with China, and not just with India, I should say. It's with China now, and Taiwan and other places. It's because of who we are, and I'm very proud of the fact of who we are, and we just need to understand that that's something we have to cope with. So profile and raising the profile, I think, is really quite important. And another comment I'd like to, we have a few minutes left just for your thoughts on this. And this is really something that a good friend of all of us is Cassie Rao, who was the president of the Canada-India Business Council, and now is with Fairfax. And Cassie is well known to all of us. One of the things that he's suggested to me, and the role of the diaspora in the relationship, I think this is important. It's building a knowledge network within the diaspora, and I would encourage our friends in Ottawa to think about how we be a catalyst, or how Ottawa can be a catalyst in building that knowledge network. And when I was at the foundation, we were working on a project with Dr. Kamakoti, who has now become the director of IIT Madras. And Dr. Kamakoti had 8 of his PhD students now teaching in Canada and working in Canada. So how do we identify those people that will all have those tentacles going back in India across a variety of different sectors? And how do we build that knowledge network? So just your thoughts on, whether it's coming out of the CIF or whether it comes out of ICCC, how do we kind of focus and build a mentoring knowledge-based network that can be of assistance to those people going into India to try and do business? Because Vijay, as you found out, it's not an easy thing to do. So your thoughts on that, because you raised it in your conversation about the importance of having that that network that will help you over the longer term, because it doesn't happen right away, build those relationships.
Yeah, Stewart, and I've been in this system, as you know, for full 5 years, and our times overlapped. So I know what is required beyond what is already there, and what's stopping Canadian companies. And it's exactly this kind of network that you're talking about. And if you can formalize that network, not just in Canada, but also in India, and let that network help Canadian companies do more in India. The other thing is, you said, what needs to be done to get Canadian companies over to India and get them excited? I think more or less they all know the opportunities. And my answer to your question is, tell them about the success stories. Tell them how somebody else succeeded, and then provide them with the help through this network in Canada and India. I'm repeating it again, and it may be a micro point that a lot of companies may not understand, but the existing system that exists through TECS and Ontario and EDC and others, it has limitations. It cannot take a Canadian company beyond a certain point. And what's required beyond that certain point to get the success is to have this network being available there. Now, whether it's an informal or formal, paid or unpaid, I mean, all that is something that can be built in, but there are enough people. Everybody in India knows someone who's in Canada. Let's leverage that. And many of them know. But having said that, it's also, in the 80s, I read when I was studying, still doing my business school, our international business professor used to say in the 80s, there was a global, very famous survey which was done. And people were asked, what are the 3 brands about Canada? Or 3 things about Canada that you know? And the answer was RCMP, Rockies, and McGill, right? I'm not too sure if much has changed beyond that. So it's also our responsibility, onus is on us to also educate people on both sides as to what exists on both sides, and then leverage this network.
No, and when you think about the success of TIE as an organization to help Indian companies and people in the diaspora, we should be doing something similar. The C100 exists in the technology space in Silicon Valley and now moving across the United States. Hopefully we can get a C100 type of a organization for India. As we draw to a close, I'm going to ask each of you for one sentence on what Sara has to put in her strategy. And Sara, that includes you. So we'll start with you, Ajay. What's your one sentence for Sara's strategy for India?
I guess when it comes to partnerships, it's more of collaboration over competition. Great. I think there are a lot of things happening in silos, and probably that is a show breaker actually.
Okay, Vijay, your thought, your one sentence.
Engage more with Indian states.
Good. Okay, Gary.
I would say prioritize the sector, build alliances, and do it.
Sara, your thoughts.
All great pieces. I think I just want to come back on. Sorry, I'm going to just forget about the one sentence, but I'm going to come back on the.
You're allowed to. You're a government employee. You can say what you want.
Thank you, and you're always very good to me, Stewart. But I couldn't agree more on using these amazing connections we have and the people to people. We always talk about India from we start with people to people ties are so amazing and strong, and how can we make better use of those? So, and I think about too, like what John Stackhouse has been talking about on Planet Canada, and how do you tap into Friends of Canada and the Canadian and Indian diasporas, and what can we do here? So we on the watch this space, because we are building a global mentorship program, and for exactly this reason, and this is to pull in folks who are Friends of Canada who want to support that last mile, as Vijay says, the stuff that we can't do in the Trade Commissioner service, and will help us to have that network that'll do that. And then also to think about those 200,000 students, who are coming and going each year. How do we tap into those alumni networks better, make use of the people who know us in Canada and who are from all regions of India, who can go back and pass those messages. And then at the same time, at this side, we do really count on the diaspora and on many other friends to help us get the message out about the opportunities. But let me just say, in terms of the strategy, message received, totally agree. We've got a new opportunity here, and I think that's the key for me. It is as Gary said, there's a new dynamic. It's all coming down to virtual, digital, next stage, next wave kind of growth, and we're tremendously well positioned together.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I think that's a great summary. I just might add to that I think we all understand that the opportunity is there. I think it requires a certain level of dedication and commitment. And that commitment is not just in terms of developing a strategy, but it's also resourcing that strategy, whether it's the people or the funding or the tools. Those are all important part of that process. But what's happened over the last 10 years since you and I were there is just the explosion of young, bright Indian students that have come to Canada that will really feed that network and help build that relationship. And I think that's something we really need to think about and capitalize on. And again, in the context and spirit of PBD and this day, that's really a great place to start from a strategic perspective. So I'm just looking at the time, and I see Satish has joined us. Satish, you want to have Ritesh want to have a final word before we sign off our session here. But I just want to thank all of you. It's great. It's great, even though we're virtual, it's great to see you all. It's too bad we can't be in person, because we've always all spent a lot of time together in the past, and it would be nice to catch up in person. But my thanks to you all for your honesty, your openness, and I think that some really good advice came out of this. So over to you two gentlemen. Any final words from Satish and Ritesh?
Yeah. Thank you so very much, Stewart and Sara, Ajay, Vijay, and also Gary. What an exceptional, I think, so energetic, so excellent session we had this morning. It's thoughts are swirling all across, whole body, I would say, not just the mind. It was so thought-provoking discussion, and I think the message was very loud and clear. And what a best way to have this discussion on this very momentous special occasion of celebrating the diaspora. And Gary, you made excellent point, loud and clear, that yes, on one end, like we have to do a political will, we have to work on, showcase, create that perception that at the political level, India is a country to look up to, because we are talking on a very relevant topic of economic recovery post-COVID, and looking at it, the issue or challenges we are facing, whether it's a labor shortages, whether it's a supply line interruption, or whether focusing on bringing the investments. So it's not only one way that Canadian investments are going to India. There are a lot of opportunities, as Ajay rightly mentioned. Indian companies are looking Canada very, very, very seriously. And if we don't pay much attention to it, we will lose that. And Stewart, I will give a phrase that we are just going through various local roads, through various stop sign, red lights. Now it's time to go on highway, where we have to put our feet on the accelerator, not on the brakes. So whatever speed you want to take this Canada-India economic relationship to the next level, it's up to us, entirely up to us. I remember, Stewart, going decades back, every time we took the PBD delegation to India, you hosted in Canadian High Commission, hosted a nice dinner reception for everyone. So those are the kind of a connection, having connection with Vijendra and of course, Ajay and Sara, going decades back. We all are here working in this space, but we have to have a very focused approach. And I think all the organization, whether it's a Canada-India Foundation, whether the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, whether it's a CIBC, TAI, there is another, Vipul Jani is running one organization. So we all have to work together, one, creating a broader awareness among the mainstream Canadians that how India is important for Canada, and create that ecosystem. And we are very, very happy that you all have spared your time. I know everybody is going through some of the COVID issues, and but still you took this commitment and shared your wisdom, insights, and experience, which is very important for all our listeners, and not only the people who have joined, but it's also being broadcasted through various social media and TV channels. I'm pretty sure people who have logged on, they will gain from your insights and your experience and wisdom. And we are looking forward to having this conversation more often. And as rightly said it, a sector-specific approach would be good. Having these conversations on sector-specific and creating a roadmap and strategy, working very closely with Sara, that how we can, if it is from 250 company to 750 company currently has gone to India, how we can take it to 10 times more, like 7,500 companies in next few years. And same way, vice versa, for how we can bring more investments from India to Canada. And once again, our great champion, Stewart, we can't thank you enough for leading this discussion in such a natural way. I was just watching all the chats and the discussions. Everybody was enjoying it. And we're looking forward to having more conversation down the road. And with that note, we are getting ready for our next session, which is coming. Ritesh, you want to make any remark before we move to the next session?
No, I absolutely share your sentiments. It has been such a great discussion. Thanks to Gary, Sara, Stewart, Ajay, and Vijendra. And I absolutely agree the point Vijendra made, and couldn't be a better day than Diaspora Day to stress the importance of people-to-people relationships. We just need to create that conducive environment where, small businesses, MSMEs, and people can actually create and utilize the opportunity that exists between India and Canada. There is no doubt about it. It's just that we need to work on it to realize the true potential between the two countries. Absolutely wonderful discussion. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so very much. And friends, now we will be leading to our second session. And before we start our second session, I would request our back office to just play the video for a short while, and then we'll be coming back for our second panel discussion.
भारत में जो बदलाव आ रहा है, जो नए अवसर बन रहे हैं, उसमें आपका योगदान बहुत ज्यादा महत्वपूर्ण है।
On January 9th, 2003, India holds its first ever Pravasi Bharatiya Divas to recognize and celebrate the contributions of non-resident Indians as well as the larger global Indian diaspora, currently estimated at over 25 million. The day chosen was significant as it was on that day, January 9th, that Mahatma Gandhi landed back on Indian shores from South Africa in the year 1915 and picked up the fight against India's colonial masters. India launches the formal recognition process of overseas population of Indian origin by launching Overseas Citizen of India or OCI during the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas convention held in Hyderabad on 9 January 2006. Pravasi Bharatiya Divas grows in strength to attract worldwide attention from the diaspora as well as world leaders who are invited as guests of India. 2022 completes the 18th anniversary of PBD. And since those early days when India shed its failing development model and embraced modern practices, a dramatic transformation takes place. This is all too evident today. Today, India's growth story is celebrated and sought after by the rest of the world. India, set to become the third largest economy in the world in a few short years, stands proud on the world stage. In recent years, India's reform project has picked up pace and running on super fast tracks, leading to dramatic improvements in the quality of life of its 1.35 billion people and offering multiple opportunities to the rest of the world. India is one of the hottest destinations for foreign investment by global corporations and investment funds. A recognition that the India growth story is only beginning. India becomes the first country in the world to administer 1.5 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines. Under a vaccine friendship program, India continues to supply millions of doses to needy countries. Huge improvements in infrastructure and governance became magnets for entrepreneurs both within India and abroad. A large democracy with a stern adherence to the rules of law, rising standard of living for millions of poor each year. Digital India taking shape as India boasts the largest number of people using digital payment systems. As India soars into prominence and prosperity, CIF and the 1.9 million Indo-Canadians, this great country of Canada, are looking forward to scaling new peaks and realizing greater goals in our evolving and expanding bilateral ties with India.